I could have said no. I knew how to say no. I'd said it to plenty of things over the past 2 years. Overtime shifts I didn't need, wedding invitations that would have put me at a table with people who knew Megan and me as a couple, family dinners where her name would have come up before the bread did. I had gotten very good at saying no to things that pulled me back toward the life I was still trying to leave behind. So when Carol Whitfield's number showed up on my phone on a Thursday afternoon, I should have let it go to voicemail. I didn't. Daniel. Her voice was the same. A little tired maybe, the way it always sounded after a long shift, but the same. I know I have no right to call you. She said it before I could say anything. Before I could figure out what my face was doing, or what I wanted my voice to sound like. You don't have to explain, I said. I'm not explaining. I'm acknowledging. A pause. There's a difference. That was Carol. That had always been Carol. I sat down on the edge of my kitchen counter because I didn't know what else to do with my body. Outside, my neighbor's kid was riding a bike in slow circles on the sidewalk, and I watched him for a second like the sight of something ordinary might help me figure out what to say to this woman. The bakery, she said. Something's wrong with the electrical. The breaker keeps tripping overnight, and I've had 2 cases of stuff spoil in the walk-in because the compressor keeps cutting. I called an electrician, and he said it'd be 3 weeks before he could come out. And I can't lose 3 weeks of inventory right now, Daniel. I knew enough about electrical work to know that wasn't a complicated fix. I'd rewired half my dad's garage the summer I was 19. Carol knew that. She knew it because I'd told her once, at her kitchen table, while Megan was upstairs getting ready and Carol was asking me what I was good at in a way that felt like she actually wanted to know. When? I said. Another pause. Longer this time? I wasn't sure you'd ask that. I'm asking. Saturday morning, before I open? I wrote down the address, even though I already knew it. The bakery, Sweet Proof, was on the corner of Aldine and 5th, in a narrow little building she'd been renting for 11 years. I'd been there exactly twice. Once when she'd first signed a lease and Megan dragged me along to see it, and once at the grand opening, when I stood in the back eating a piece of lemon cake and watching Carol move through a room full of people like she'd been doing it her whole life. That was 4 years ago. I was a different person then. I thought I knew what my life was going to look like. I got there at 7:30. The front of the bakery was still dark. The close sign still turned in the door, but there was light coming from somewhere inside and I could smell coffee from the sidewalk. I knocked twice and heard her moving around before the lock turned. Carol Whitfield opened the door and looked the same and different at once. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing a flour-dusted apron over a flannel shirt, and she had the same reading glasses she used to push up on her forehead. She looked like someone who had been awake since 5 and wasn't bothered by it. You came, she said. I said I would. She stepped back to let me in. The place was small and warm. A glass case along the front wall, a few round tables with mismatched chairs. Behind the counter, the kitchen door was propped open, and I could see sheet pans cooling on a rack. A stand mixer with a bowl full of something cream-colored. The whole room smelled like brown butter and vanilla and that specific kind of early morning quiet that only exists before a place opens its doors to the world. I set my bag down and asked her to show me the panel. It was in the back hallway just past the walk-in cooler. Older box, mid-90s probably, double tap breakers in 2 places and a ground wire that had been spliced with electrical tape. That was now mostly just wishful thinking. The breaker labeled Kohler 2 had a slight scorch mark around the edge that was either old or recent and either way wasn't good. How long has this been going on? I asked. The tripping? About 6 weeks. She was standing just behind me, arms folded, watching. I kept resetting it and thinking it would stop. It wasn't going to stop. No, she said. I know that now. I crouched down and started taking the cover off. She went back to the kitchen. I could hear her working. The soft thud of a tray sliding into the oven, the hiss of something going into a hot pan. And the sounds mixed with the hum of the cooler and the occasional car passing on 5th Street. And I was aware of how strange it was to be here, in this specific building, doing this specific thing. I hadn't talked to Carol since the divorce. Not because we'd had a falling out. We hadn't. We just existed on the same side of a line I'd crossed by marrying her daughter and uncrossed by losing her. Whatever relationship we'd had lived inside that one. And when the marriage ended, I assumed the rest ended with it. I hadn't expected to miss her specifically. But I had. A little. Quietly, the way you miss things you're not supposed to admit you miss. By 9, she brought me coffee without asking if I wanted it. Black, which was right. I didn't remember telling her that. Maybe I had. Maybe she just noticed. I was sitting on the floor of the back hallway by then, new wire run, working on the ground connection. She set the mug down on the floor beside me and didn't leave. "How have you been?" she asked. "Fine." I looked up. Actually fine, not just saying it fine. She smiled a little at that. "Good." She leaned against the wall and crossed her arms the way she always did when she was thinking. "You're still with the firm?" "Same one. Different projects. They put me on a commercial build in Westheimer last spring that kept me busy." "I heard you moved." "Montrose. Got a place near the park." She nodded like that was the right answer. "I always thought you'd do well in Montrose." I didn't ask how she knew I'd moved. I assumed Megan at some point. Or just Houston being what it is. A big city with small-town information flow. "The bakery," I said. "You doing okay?" She was quiet for a second. Honest answer or polite answer? Honest. She sat down. Not on the floor, but on a low wooden step stool she pulled from around the corner, and she sat on it with her elbows on her knees like someone who was tired of standing up straight for a minute. Honest answer is the last 2 years have been hard. The rent went up. Flour went up. Eggs. Don't get me started on eggs. I had one girl who worked for me for 3 years, quit to go do content creation, which I completely understand, but also, I needed her. She paused. "I've been doing most of it alone." "You didn't want to bring someone else on?" "I didn't want to pay for someone else to be here while I'm still figuring out if I'm going to make it through the year." She said it plainly, not self-pitying, just stated the way Carol stated most things. "December is what saves me, usually. Holiday orders. But if I lose product every other week through the summer, I don't get to December in good shape." I looked back at the panel. "You'll make it to December." "Because of the wiring?" "Because the wiring is fixable. That means it wasn't the thing standing between you and December, just a problem somebody should have caught sooner." I tightened the connection. "It's fixed now." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "Thank you, Daniel." The way she said my name was different from most people. She said all of it, both syllables, like they were both worth saying. Megan used to call me Dan. Most people do. Carol had always said Daniel from the very first time we met, standing in her kitchen doorway while Megan grabbed her coat, and I'd extended my hand and said, "Daniel, nice to meet you," and she'd said, "Daniel," back like she was testing the sound of it, deciding if it fit. I put the panel cover back on and stood up. She made me stay for breakfast. I didn't argue. She put a plate in front of me at one of the small tables near the window, scrambled eggs and a piece of toast cut diagonally, and a blueberry scone that was still warm. She sat across from me with her own coffee and didn't make it a big thing. We just sat. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Do you think she was wrong to end it?" I set my fork down. Outside, the street was starting to fill up. A woman walking a dog, a guy unlocking the door of the laundromat across the street. Normal Saturday morning in the middle of Houston. "I think she knew what she wanted," I said. "And she was honest about it eventually." "Eventually. Better than never." Carol looked at her mug. "She told me it was because you were too steady, that she felt like nothing was ever uncertain with you." She paused. She said that like it was a flaw. I didn't say anything. "I want you to know," Carol said, "that I never thought it was a flaw. It was a small thing to say. And I wasn't prepared for how much it settled something in my chest I hadn't realized was still unsettled. I'd spent 2 years telling myself I wasn't bothered by the way Megan had described me when she left. Reliable, predictable, safe. Said with that slight softening in her voice that was supposed to be kind and wasn't. I'd done a decent job of not caring about it, or at least a decent job of acting like I didn't. "She's doing well," Carol said. "I think she is anyway. We talk, but not the way we used to. That happens. It shouldn't." She said it quietly, but with that quality she had, where something small felt like it meant something bigger. "She's my daughter. I don't know how it got to where we talk about the surface of things." I thought about my own mother. How easy it was for whole months to pass where we only covered the surface. How you could love someone and still end up mostly performing the version of yourself they expected. "You built this place alone," I said. She looked up. "The bakery. You found the location, signed the lease, did the build-out. You told me once it took you 4 months just to dial in the croissant recipe because the humidity in this building is different from where you learned. You did all of that. I picked up the scone. You're not someone things happen to. You're someone who figures things out. She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding something. I called you, she said, because there was no one else I trusted to actually fix it. I know. But also because... She stopped, started again. I thought about calling you a few times after. I never knew if that would be strange or if it would be welcome or if you'd even pick up. I picked up. You picked up, she agreed. I came back the following Saturday. She hadn't asked me to. I told myself I wanted to check on the panel, make sure the cooler wasn't cycling weird, make sure the fix had held. That was true. It was also not the whole truth. She had the coffee ready before I knocked. We fell into it without much discussion. I checked the panel. She was working on a batch of something that involved a lot of careful folding, and we talked the way people do when the talking is easy. She asked about the project in Westheimer. I asked about the holiday order list she was starting to build. She told me about a woman who came in every Tuesday morning and ordered the same thing, an almond croissant and a small black coffee, and who had been coming in for 6 years, and whose name Carol still didn't know, but whose order she started making when she saw her parking outside. Why didn't you ever ask her name, I said. Because some things are nice the way they are. I thought about that more than I probably should have. Around 11, her phone rang and she stepped into the kitchen to take it. I could hear one side of it. Short answers, a pause, a yes. I understand that had a certain kind of patience in it that sounded expensive. When she came back, she sat down across from me and put her phone face down on the table. Megan, she said, not asking if I wanted to know, just telling me matter-of-factly. She heard from someone that your truck was here last week. Houston being what it is. What did she say? I asked. She asked what was going on. Carol looked at the table. I told her you came to fix the electrical. She said. She paused. She said she thought it was strange. Strange. Her word. I turned my coffee mug in my hands. Is it strange? Carol looked up at me then, and there was something in her expression that wasn't quite a smile, and wasn't quite sadness, and was something in the particular territory between the two that I didn't have a name for. I don't think so, she said. But I understand why she might. I stayed another hour. When I left, she walked me to the door, and we stood on the sidewalk for a second in the warm September air with people moving past us on the street. She thanked me for coming back. I said it wasn't a problem. She said she'd been thinking about replacing the back door seal on the walk-in, that she thought it was losing a few degrees overnight, and that she wasn't sure if she needed a part or a person. Send me a picture of the seal, I said. I'll tell you what you need. She nodded. She looked like she was going to say something else. She didn't. I walked to my truck. I didn't look back, but somewhere around the corner of Aldine I was aware of the fact that I was looking forward to the picture of a walk-in cooler door seal in a way that had nothing to do with refrigeration, and that this was either a reasonable thing or a complicated thing, and possibly both. October came. I replaced the walk-in seal. She made me a batch of the almond croissants to take home because she said she'd made too many and didn't want them to sit. I ate one on the drive back and it was the best thing I'd tasted in 2 years. November. She had a problem with one of the gas lines on the commercial range. Not a dangerous one. Just a fitting that had started to weep slightly and needed to be tightened by someone who knew what they were looking at. I knew what I was looking at. I started showing up on Saturdays like it was a thing I did. Neither of us made it into something it wasn't or talked about what it was. She'd have coffee ready. I'd find something useful to do. We'd sit together for an hour before she unlocked the doors. It was the most at ease I'd felt in my own skin, in longer than I wanted to think about. One Saturday in late November, she was decorating a cake near the window when I came in. Thanksgiving was a week out, and she'd had 12 custom orders, and I could see her shoulders were tight in a way that meant she'd been on her feet too long. I asked if I could help with anything that didn't require skill, and she handed me a pastry bag and showed me how to hold it, and I stood next to her for 45 minutes piping small rosettes onto the edges of a spice cake. I was terrible at it. She kept moving my hand slightly without making a thing of it. You're thinking too hard, she said. That's a thing I do. I know. She piped a perfect rosette in 2 seconds and glanced up at me. It's not always a flaw. I set the bag down and looked at her. She kept her eyes on the cake for a second before she looked back at me, and it was the kind of look that answers a question neither person has asked out loud yet. Carol, I said. I know, she said. I know what you're going to say. Do you? She set down her own bag. She wiped her hands on her apron and she looked at me the way she looked at me that first morning in the back hallway, when she sat on the step stool and told me the honest answer instead of the polite one. You're going to say this is complicated, she said. It is complicated. Yes. She didn't look away. Most things worth something are. I thought about what it would mean. I thought about Megan, who was living in Austin now and who had, by all accounts, moved on. I thought about what people would say. The people who had known us as son-in-law and mother-in-law. The people who would see this as strange or wrong or some kind of betrayal of a category. I thought about how easy it would be to say this is too much and go back to my apartment in Montrose and my Saturday mornings that didn't look like this yet. Then I thought about the black coffee. The way she said my name. The way she'd sat on that step stool like she was tired of holding everything upright. The woman who built this place alone and kept building it when it got hard, who made croissants in a humid building until she got the recipe right, who said honest answer instead of polite answer, like it was the only way she knew how to talk. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay? You said most things worth something are complicated. I looked at her. I'm saying okay. She stood there for a second. Then she laughed. A small, surprised, real laugh that I hadn't heard before and immediately wanted to hear again. She shook her head and turned back to the cake. Sit down, Daniel, she said. I still have 11 more of these to do. I sat down. I picked up the pastry bag again. My rosettes were still terrible. She moved my hand again, gently, without a word, and this time I didn't overthink it. Megan called me in December. I didn't dodge it. I picked up on the second ring and we talked for 20 minutes in a way we hadn't talked since before the end. Not stiff, not performing, just two people who had once meant a lot to each other and had landed somewhere on the other side of that. She asked if it was true, what she'd heard. I told her it was something. I wasn't sure what yet, but it was something. There was a long pause. She deserves someone who shows up, Megan said finally. Her voice was quiet and even, and I believed her. She never had that. I didn't answer right away. I looked out my kitchen window at the street below, at the same sidewalk where the neighbor's kid rode his bike in circles, the same view I'd been looking at when Carol called me in October. I know how to show up, I said. I know you do, she said. That was always the thing about you. She said it like it was a compliment this time. Like she'd figured out, in the year and a half since, that it was a compliment. We hung up and I stood in my kitchen for a while, thinking about how strange it is that sometimes the thing someone holds against you turns out to be the very thing that brings you somewhere you were supposed to be. The next Saturday, I brought Carol a small cactus in a terracotta pot because I'd seen it at the market and thought she would like it. She put it in the window next to the espresso machine and said it needed almost no attention to survive. And I said that seemed right for something that was going to live in a bakery. And she looked at me with that quiet thing in her expression and said nothing. And said everything. I stayed until noon that day. When I left, she walked me to the door again. This time, I looked back. I keep thinking about the cactus, not the big moments, not the conversation in the back hallway, not the phone call with Megan, not the Saturday I stayed until noon, just the cactus in the terracotta pot, sitting in the window next to Carol's espresso machine, needing almost nothing to survive. There's something in that image I can't shake. For 2 years after the divorce, I thought the problem was that I was too much of something. Too steady. Too predictable. Too easy to take for granted. Megan said it like she was being gentle, but the message underneath was clear enough. Being reliable was the same as being boring, and boring was a reason to leave. I believed her on some level. Not out loud, but quietly, in the way you absorb things people say about you when you're still in the middle of caring what they think. What I understand now is that she wasn't wrong about who I was. She was wrong about what it was worth. Carol never called me to fix anything she couldn't have eventually figured out herself. She spent 11 years solving problems alone in that building. Bad equipment, rising rents, a humidity problem that took 4 months to crack just for a croissant recipe. She didn't need me the way someone needs rescuing. She needed someone she trusted to show up and do what they said they'd do. And that distinction matters more than I knew how to say back then. I think about the choices we made in that story, hers and mine both. She could have called a stranger off a list. I could have let her number go to voicemail. Neither of us did, and the reason neither of us did had everything to do with a quality I think gets undervalued. The simple integrity of showing up honestly without pretending to be something you're not. I didn't pretend I wasn't still carrying something. She didn't pretend she wasn't running on fumes. We just sat across from each other and told the honest answer instead of the polite one every single time, until the honest answer became something worth holding on to. That's not luck. That's a choice you make again and again in small moments that don't feel significant until you look back and realize they were the whole thing. And I think about what it took to get there. Not grand gestures, not certainty, just the willingness to think clearly about what was actually in front of me instead of what I was afraid it might mean. And then the stubbornness to keep coming back on Saturdays even when I wasn't sure yet, because something in me knew that the only way to find out if something is real is to not run from it before it has a chance to become real. Carol built a bakery alone. She got the recipe right by doing it wrong for 4 months in a humid building until she understood the problem well enough to solve it. I think that's the same thing, just in a different shape. You don't get to the thing that's actually good for you by taking the easy route or by letting fear make decisions on your behalf. You get there by being honest, by thinking past the surface, and by refusing to quit on something just because it's hard to explain to other people. The cactus needs almost nothing to survive. But Carol put it in the window anyway, where it gets light. I think she understands something about that. I'm starting to.